Yeah. So how did your entry in the Greatest Royal Rumble then come about? Because that was like I think the first time that you had really done anything on the main roster, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that? Oh, Greatest Royal Rumble?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, they had they had a segment in there that had people, the actual guys from Saudi Arabia, and the Davaris came out with a Iranian flag, and these guys, kicked their heads off or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, so they had a tryout to try to find those guys. They didn't have them before that. So myself, Dan Matha, Matt Bloom, Canyon Seaman, one of the doctors, and a couple security guys, we went over there like 2 weeks before the Greatest Royal Rumble in Jeddah, and we worked it was one big tryout, and then they picked 8 people, and then we worked with those 8 guys for another 4 days. So wow. I think we got there, we had like a day off, and then we had 4.5 days of tryouts in a row, then like another day off, and then like another 4 or 5 days of tryouts, and then a day off, and then we did the show. And so we were over there, and we'd been working the tryout, me and Dan and I, and so they decided to. We didn't find that out until the night before. I think the Greatest Royal Rumble, like, it was like, you guys might be in it, you might not, kind of thing, or just be prepared, right? Like, it's possible that you guys will get in it. It's a 50-man Royal Rumble. They're going to need people potentially. Right. So that was how it happened. And it was awesome. That day was a long, long day. I remember being like, because the Royal Rumble was the last thing to go on, and we had to help the Saudi guys, with that little segment. And I think they wanted to do it at noon or something. So we left the hotel, I think, at 10:30 that morning, and the Royal Rumble didn't go on until like 11:30, I think, close to midnight. So it was, I remember being alone, and I remember being like excited, and then be like, okay, I need to settle down, and then be like excited again, and like, because I'm used to, it's like I never wrestled on the main roster. Of course, I'm like juiced up, right? Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like I'm wrestling in front of everyone. I gotta like, it's my chance, or this is one of the chances, who knows when I'm going to get another chance like this. I need to make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah. How was it just being inside? I mean, 2 weeks in Saudi Arabia is more time than other members of the roster got to spend there. How was your time in Saudi Arabia?
It was cool, man. Honestly, I've been to Jeddah twice and Riyadh once. So Riyadh, not as cool, but Jeddah's on the Red Sea, and it's definitely a little more laxed. The vibe is definitely not as uptight and as strict as kind of what you get in Riyadh. The feeling, of just sort of like the enforcement from the religious police, right? There's kind of like, I don't get into the long spiel, but there's like the governments, and then there's like the religious police. There's 2 sets, and the religious police are sort of what govern, the day-to-day, like making sure that the women are adhering to the dress code, and there's like different sections in restaurants: single men, single women, families, and you have to act a certain way and be like under certain guidelines to be in. Like, the family section is where you want to go, but you have to have guys and girls, and there's an interesting kind of politic with it or whatever that exists. So the culture was very different, but people, we had a bunch of big white guys, so people were excited kind of to see us or whatever. And we're like, hey, what are these guys up to, And we had this guy named YL that was a Saudi national, and that was, and he spent half his time in the States. And he kind of, he showed us around. He was sort of our like guide, and we did a lot of cool stuff. We went snorkeling and jet skiing on the Red Sea. Like, I just seem to remember being an awesome trip, other than obviously we were sober for 2 weeks, which is not like I'm like, oh, I can't stay sober for 2 weeks, but just, it's like a thing, right? Like, hey, you're going to Saudi Arabia, you can't drink, there's nothing going on there. And you're like, inevitably when you get there and you can't go to sleep because you're halfway around the world, and you're like, man, a couple of glasses of wine would be pretty nice right now to help me go to sleep,
Yes, I agree with that. Man, I hadn't even thought about that. Like, that's a very different kind of 2-week assignment.
Yeah, it was, it was, like I said, we stayed in an awesome place, and it was, and the food was great. The people were awesome, like, obviously, like I said, very culturally different, but one of the things I find most interesting about Saudi Arabia is the dichotomy of like barren desert landscape and then like very opulent marble and glass buildings right next to each other, right? Just the most beautiful building you ever saw, and then just literally right in front of it, like 10 yards in front of it, and all around it, just desert, like just dirt, nothing.
Wow. So, and it would seem that they would have quite a bit of faith in you to send you over in that position, though. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think they could trust that I'm responsible, right? That I can act a certain way, that I can, represent the company in a way that is in a positive light.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So wait, while we're talking to Saudi stuff, obviously you were there at Crown Jewel too. I don't know if you want to talk about like what you remember from that infamous plane experience, but obviously that thing was a story unto itself when everything started out about it,
Yeah, I mean, I was there. I was part of it. It was wild. I mean, I wasn't like scared, I'm like, I like to think I'm a fairly logical person, so I'm like, well, even if they are messing with us to some extent, like they're only going to mess with us up to the point where it doesn't become an international thing, right? Like they might want to mess with the company, but they're not trying to like mess with America. And they don't want it to be like, hey, the Saudi government didn't let a bunch of wrestlers go home. Like they don't want that story, in my opinion, anyways. That's how I was feeling about it at the time. But I mean, we leave the show and we go to what is like the executive, hangar or whatever, where it's not the public place. It's, it's like a private charter area. And I don't know how long we sat there, 8 hours, maybe something like that, before finally it was like, well, we got on the plane once and then we had to get back off of it. It was like, they let us on, but then they wouldn't let the plane go, or they wouldn't let the final paperwork. So we were on the plane for like 2 hours. Then we got back off. Then we had to wait in the lobby for like another hour and a half or so, because they had to get the buses and stuff, right? And then obviously there's the logistics of trying to find a hotel now for however many people we have on the trip, multiple 100 plus or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, we stayed for, I don't know, however long, maybe another 12 hours, 15 hours, something like that in a hotel. And then we head back. And I remember it being kind of like sketchy, because we went back, and when we got off, and then when we got on the plane and back off of it, so both of the times it was like you walked out onto the tarmac and you basically walked right onto the plane, right? The plane was right there. You didn't have to get on anything or nothing. So then the time we're going home, I guess they moved the plane or something because it had to stay overnight, but they didn't tell anybody anything about that. So we get through security and everything, and then we have to get on these big, people movers, essentially like trams or whatever, just stand up airplane trams. And so they take off and we start driving, and it's like we've been driving for maybe 5 minutes, and we're now like, there's nothing else around, we don't know. We're driving over to wherever the plane is, which is like on the outskirts of the main airport, and we're off in the executive area. So now it's just all of us are driving through the middle of the desert. Like, what is happening, dude? Like, why are we driving through the middle of the desert and all these like people movers by themselves, and like I said, I mean, it was just, we just ended up going to the plane and getting on the plane. But I remember being for like 10 minutes, kind of everyone like, what is happening here, dude? Like,
wow. Wow. What a story, man. That's pretty wild. So
it was, yeah, man. It was, it definitely was. It was, my wife was not pleased.
I bet not, especially seeing all the press coming out of that thing. Oh, yeah. Man. Wow. Would you go back to Saudi Arabia after that or no?
I don't know. I'm not in a hurry to go back, certainly. I mean, maybe I don't know that I'd go back to wrestle. Like, I was prepared to tell WWE I don't want to go back to Saudi Arabia and be like a part of this thing again, Yeah, probably not, but maybe under certain circumstances. I'm not like, I don't hate Saudi Arabia or anything like that for that. I mean, I don't blame that on, anything other than kind of, I guess, politics, right? Or whatever it ended up being. I don't know nobody will ever know the truth of the matter. I mean, anyone who knows about the story, I'm sure knows about the reports. And so, yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think we were political pawns a little bit in some regards. That's at least what it seems like to me. And yeah, that definitely would make me think twice, I guess, about going back to Saudi Arabia.
Man, blue collar, small kid grows up to become political pawn. That's a pretty wild story, my friend.
It is, yeah.
Maybe not the headline. So when you guys transition out of NXT, pack up here a little bit. So when you guys transition from NXT to the main roster, what were you told the plans were? Were you told there were plans for you guys once you'd made it to the main roster away from NXT?
Like plans in terms of, no, I mean, just, you know, we were up and we were doing our thing and like, hey, you're heavy machinery, do your thing, you know what I mean, or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, for us, we're always focused on getting over with the crowd. That's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do. That's where our mental energy and focus is going while we're, you know, heavy machinery is heavy machinery together. That's the conversations we're having in cars and planes, wherever we are, like, hey, like, what worked, what didn't in terms of the audience. And that's, you know, that was who we wrestled for.
Yeah.
That was what we were about. And, you know, I'm pretty happy with at least what we were able to accomplish when we were given the opportunity to accomplish it.
Yeah, you know, the dynamic between you two was really enjoyable, right? Like, he's way over the top, you're more the straight man. I mean, it's a classic dynamic, right? And it worked really well together. And one of the first groups you worked with the New Day, but you also got to work with the pairing of Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan, which was a really unique pairing. What was it like for you getting to work with Daniel Bryan? I mean, he's really kind of one of the best wrestlers of our generation.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Daniel Bryan is modern day Bret Hart. Like, that's, you know, he's like, I don't know. I mean, he's the man. He's the best, dude. He's like, whether it comes to like his mind and kind of talking through how and why we're gonna do things, or, you know, whether it comes to the execution of said thing in the ring. Like, I don't think you or me could point out somebody who definitively is better than him at either of those two things. And so, yeah, I mean, what a glorious opportunity it was for us to be able to pick his brain a little bit and kind of see how like he moved around the heavy machinery pieces, you know, talk about like, what do you guys do, you know, and have a discussion about the ethos, if you will, of heavy machinery and how that kind of might be able to play off of them in the large scale, you know, in the big picture. And then, okay, well, how does that sort of equate to, you know, the minutia? How do we do the micro here on the day to day? What does the promo look like? What does the matches look like? Like, what is the beats of the story that we're telling? You know, and then also just kind of seeing how he operates, right? Seeing like what questions he's asking, what people, and why he's going about doing those things. At least for me, was, you know, I was trying to take as much of that kind of stuff as I possibly could from, you know, working with someone like that.
How did you feel about them dropping your last name and just making it Tucker? When you guys were getting going on the main roster.
I wish they wouldn't have, you know, but you know, it is what it is, I guess, right? What the boss says goes. So
is it just
I mean, that wasn't the hill I was going to die on. Let me just say that, you know what I mean? I just said, okay, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Is it just a thing where they don't like 2-word names for whatever reason? It's a trend that everybody always talks about, you know?
I mean, I honestly think it has to do with how long it takes the announcer to say like Otis Dozovic, Tucker Knight, heavy machinery. Like, I think that's too long. And I think that's one of the reasons anyways. You know, I have no idea. That's pure speculation on my part. Literally, I'm just throwing out a guess, but I've thought about that. And that's kind of why I think that's a part of it.
What a compelling theory. I've never thought about the seconds saved by cutting out the last names of individuals for the ring announcers. Okay. I buy that. I buy into that. Why, how did you feel when they started pushing Otis more as a single star and you kind of as his friend? What was that period like for you there?
I mean, obviously I understood that, you know, heavy machinery as I knew it was in jeopardy, right? Like,
yeah,
maybe even if we're not having discussions about that and we're not talking about it, like in my mind, I know I've watched, I pay attention to the way things go. Like, this is not good, right? At least in the context of heavy machinery and us continuing to be successful as a tag team, this is probably not a good thing for us. So like, how do we try to steer it back?
Yeah.
Potentially, you know, but at the same time, like I said, I mean, I genuinely love Otis, so I'm not like, I don't want to try to like steer it back in that direction so hard that it messes up his thing. You know, this has been his dream since he was a kid. So, and I love him, like, and I would never want to mess that up. Right. So, you know, it was kind of tough for me in some regards, because obviously I want heavy machinery to continue in in the way that it was going. But at the same time, like, I don't want to deprive one of my best friends of, what could ultimately be a really, really big opportunity for him in his career and in his life. So, it was conflicting, I guess you could say. And I mean, looking back on it, from the time, well, I mean, we did the Miz stuff, and I thought, that maybe there was a chance that we were gonna, like, lose that in a tag match, and we would kind of continue to be heavy machinery to some extent. I thought that was an opportunity. I thought there was a chance that was going to happen coming out of, the trial segment, basically, at least at one point in time. So I was still, holding out hope that it would happen. But and trying to think of, kind of maybe what other things I would be able to do if and when we split up, or how that was going to happen. But, there wasn't a lot of information being given out. So it was pretty tough to make definitive, idea plans when you don't really know, like, you're just trying to make guesses, essentially, for yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I wasn't definitely not in the best spot mentally, you know what I mean? Particularly following us splitting up and not doing anything, and, knowing that, or feeling like things were probably not going to be successful, at least for me there in that instance, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I mean, it was tough, but that's life. Like, I try my best to be about the journey and not about, the goals, right? And not about the successes and the failures. Like, the success and failure is, to me, just like a measuring stick of your process, right? Whether you which pieces of your process are working and which pieces of your process aren't working based on your successes and failures, to me. And like, that's what they should be looked at, right? So it's like, okay, well, there's places for me to obviously get better as a performer here based on the things that happened. And like, I could be depressed about it forever, or, I could take a good hard look about what are the things I need to make, what are the changes I need to make? Do I need to make changes? What kind of mental changes, what kind of physical changes do I need to make? Like, what do I want in the first place coming out of this? And I haven't figured all those things out, but, I feel like I'm on a pretty good path. Definitely, I'm in a much more positive, place than I was a few months ago.
That's great to hear. I mean, and that's the thing, is now you're kind of free of that system, right? And you're out there getting to kind of do your own thing. I've certainly seen some people say some very nice things about you and advocate for you. I think we all saw the Chris Jericho thing shortly after your release, obviously. So what are you watching right now? What are you interested in at the moment when it comes to pro wrestling?
Man, I mean, my favorite thing that I've been looking at and seeing is what my boy EC3 has been up to. Very happy for him, and not just what he's been up to in terms of wrestling, but just what he's been up to overall, as a whole picture, right? Like, I'm much more than a wrestler, and I don't want to. For a lot of my life, I was maybe wrestler was a really big part of my identity, and I've worked hard to kind of not shed that as a whole, but have more balance, right? Have father as an identity, have husband as an identity, and I want to have coach as an identity. I want to have mentor as an identity, and so kind of figuring out what that looks like for me and how I want to pursue those things, outside of wrestling, so that I'm getting some serious fulfillment. That's been where kind of my main mental focus has been. Wrestling wise, other things I've been enjoying, I've been watching ROH, I've been watching NWA. I enjoy both of those products. I've obviously see what AEW and TNA are doing, of course. I think AEW has been very successful, particularly at, like, to me, the rising tide lifts all ships. And I think, like, having multiple healthy companies that have a little bit different style and a little bit different flair is only really good for wrestling. And I'm really, and obviously now people are going to start coming back, and I would hope the indies are going to start really getting going. And I've never done that. I've never been a part of that scene. And I'm looking forward to kind of the freedom that is available in that scene to just explore and try to improve as a performer. You know, that's kind of my main goal going forward is I just want to get as good as I personally can be, not compared to anyone else, you know, and just kind of figure out truly what Levi Cooper's identity is inside of the ring.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing is like, it is compelling because you went right into that system and now you're out here on the other side and all you were given was that knowledge. I would love to see you in like a New Japan space or a Ring of Honor space. I think there's a lot of great, you and Brody King, I think could have a lot of fun together. So I see that out there for all of you, man. Anyway, I didn't realize how much time I'd taken you over here. I'm sorry about that, Levi.
Good, man.
I want to thank you just for taking some time to talk to me, man. A lot of people wondering what you're up to, what your next steps are, and it's great to hear from you. Where do you want to send people to find you, follow you, support you, all those great things out there?
Yeah, man. I mean, you see on here, you can, my Instagram is the same as my Twitter, Real Levi Cooper. I've been doing Twitch stuff, been trying to get down on it a lot. Been playing video games now, but I'm going to start doing yoga on there. I'm going to start cooking on there, I think. So that's Levi Cooper Live on Twitch. You know, just going to be running all kinds of ideas, basically, you know, off of that, and you know, going to be looking to do some serious wrestling, right? Some serious wrestling. This year, I'm taking a few bookings, you know, but obviously, I said earlier, my wife is due in October, and I really want to be a part of that. I want to be home for that. Yeah. So, especially the back half of this year, I won't be, you know, going too often, but as soon as 2022 hits the ground, you know, I'm gonna be looking to, you know, like I said, hit the ground running, and very excited, man. Very excited.